Welcome to Life as a Patient Doctor, where we transform my blog into an audio experience. I'm your host, MedPsych Moss, navigating healthcare as a patient and a future MD. Embark on a journey of vulnerability as we uncover the realities of trauma and developing resilience. Hit that follow and join us on this extraordinary life as a patient doctor. And now for the show. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Today, I'll be reading from the blog post, How One's Identity Can Be Shaped Through Life's Traumas, Struggles, and Failures. And I decided to read this blog post today because I've been asked to talk about two important things. One, disabilities. Two, failures. Failures doesn't have to be just failures in school and academics. It can be just not achieving what you or society want to achieve. So I'm going to be reading a little bit about that, why I myself decided to share all these challenges in my life, and then also how it impacts our personal identity of who we are, who we believe we are, and how we interact with society. So here I'm going to read. In the picture for this blog post, I put actually something from my STEP exam, which if you don't know, for medicine, it is the board exam that we have to take in medical school in order to progress in our medical school career. So if you don't know already, from my blog posts or from other things, I did fail step 1 the first time. And now this has been 2-3 years ago. And this was a very significant emotional journey for me because when I received that failure, my life really crumbled. And I remember specifically going to the beach, the Chicago Lake beach with my husband and collapsing to the ground and just letting all my emotions out. Up to that point, I really had not cried. I was really dissociated. And when I got to the beach, everything just came out, and I felt like my life was over. I felt that up to this point, all my hard work to become a doctor had just been ripped away from me because I had failed the board exam. And this blog post was written talking a little bit about that experience and how I was able to get up after that failure and decide that, no, this does not have to define me. I can become a doctor. I can try again. And I will not give up. So we'll get back to the blog post. It reads, why do people hide their struggles and failures? The fear of failure and actually going through the failure are really so stigmatized in our society. People do not like to share their mishaps, not just because of the shame, but because they fear it will change the way the world sees them. Let me be honest. Sharing your struggles most likely will change how the world sees you. It might even change how you view yourself. However, that does not have to be a negative or detrimental consequence. Our life story encompasses a mix of our accomplishments and our failures, while our identity is how we view our placement in our own story, in our community. Yes, every choice can have an impact on our immediate and distant future. However, just because the path has been altered doesn't mean that it should tear you down. What would life be like if everything went as planned? No bumps in the road or surprises? Well, we might be less stressed, but would we be more fulfilled? This year, and I do want to pause, when I wrote this was the year that I also took a leave of absence from medical school. So this year it was 2022. It was between my second and third year of medical school. So I'm talking about this period. This year was all about trying to separate my pain, mistakes, and failures from my identity. From the moment I decided to take a leave of absence from medical school, challenges continuously arose. Sometimes I felt like I was being chased down a mountain by a boulder, tripping over rocks and slamming it into trees. I would then have to make a quick decision if I would just let the boulder conquer me or if I should keep going. From financial devastation to mental and physical health struggles to almost losing the chance of becoming a doctor after failing my board exam twice. The struggles never seemed to end. I chose to share my experience with others because I knew I wasn't alone. Other people were out there similarly struggling, but the society kept them quietly suffering. The anxiety and fear of being ostracized dominated their decisions to prevent them from sharing their struggles. Interestingly, once I opened up that I took leave of absence from medical school, I learned that 5 other classmates were in the same predicament. That number slowly grew, and we created a group chat to know that we are not alone through this experience. There were different reasons each person took time off, but what linked us is that we now knew that we were silently struggling and suffering, but we were not alone anymore. Emotions of shame, anger, and sadness echoed across many of the initial messages. However, over time, it became a strong community of hope and mental healing. The community has now grown to over 20 students from the various academic years who are currently or just finished their leave of absence or taking time off. Having a community of individuals who are similarly struggling can have a phenomenal impact on one's feelings of self-worth and identity. These types of community support groups have been shown frequently to be fruitful. In medicine, we commonly recommend individuals suffering from various mental and physical health conditions to find other individuals to form a sense of community, to know that they're not alone. However, rarely as medical students and physicians do we place ourselves in a support group to share our own struggles. The culture of medical education has been fostered by a cis male Eurocentric lens, which values objective facts over subjective emotions. We are trained that the exceptional physician is stoic and keeps their emotions at bay. So we have the full mental capacity to critically assess medical conditions. And it is seen as weak for the physicians who express pain, mental, or the pain that they're themselves suffering, emotions that they're having, or even the mental and physical health illnesses that they themselves struggle with. In turn, we rarely hear about medical students and physicians sharing their own pains, fears, and failures. Similarly, when I learned in medical school, I had endometriosis and anxiety. I didn't want to make a big deal out of my condition for fear of being seen as incapable of becoming a physician. However, once I decided to join social media and find other medical providers who are also advocates for illnesses they themselves experience, I learned, again, I was not alone in my suffering. And I began to see all these chronic health conditions, disabilities in more a positive light. I wanted to be like them and inspire others, both patients and medical professionals, to live beyond the social stigmas of having a disability or a health condition. In turn, I'm opening up to accepting my conditions as part of my identity. And I do want to say, it's not all my identity. I'm not just a doctor, just a patient. My identities are more than that. Following. My identity is more than my mental and medical illnesses, more than my failures, more than my accomplishments. In turn, my experiences are just a speck of life experiences, which make me who I am today. Every new challenge in my life provides me lessons, which I choose to use as a form of resilience for future obstacles. From the outside, it is easy to use failures and achievements as a way to place other individuals into boxes. But it's also in our nature and normal way for our brain to understand and process the world around us. However, even though we use this as a shortcut to remember the stories of others, it doesn't mean we need to view ourselves in a similar way. In order for us to understand our own identities, we can move past experiences of struggle and triumph. So, as I reflect upon the months of struggling with my identity during my leave of absence from medical school, I'm next going to talk about a little bit of what it looked like to struggle with these various failures and what it meant to go from medical school to be back as needing to find a job, needing to figure out how I'm going to put food on the table, all those things. So, this is what happened. After spicing up my resume, I applied to over 50 jobs, similar to what I had done during college and my gap years. These included tutoring, nannying, caregiving, fitness teaching, social work. And even though many jobs said they were available, they either never got back to me or just denied me. Some said I was overqualified. And some weren't able to pay me above minimum wage, which I needed because to make up the money that I had lost for student loans, I believe it was like $11,000 or $12,000 just for those couple months. Actually, I should say for the entire leave of absence, it was about $30,000. I had to all of a sudden just pull out, in addition to dealing with my health conditions, paying for my health condition, studying for Step 1 exam. I now had to figure out. This was very emotionally, physically difficult, this leave of absence. And then also, as I'm actively applying everywhere, places who said that they had availability, that they were looking for workers, they didn't accept me. I had worked in previous jobs where I was making more money, and they weren't able to pay. And getting denied over and over, it really impacted me and my identity. This led to me feeling devalued and full of self-doubt on my own skills that I had developed over the past 6 years, even before I was a graduate student, before I was even a medical student. I worked as a case manager for children with disabilities, a caregiver for the elderly. I was a martial arts instructor, an EMT, a phlebotomist. So I reapplied for these positions, but it just didn't work out initially. However, I persisted, and eventually I did find some amazing jobs. I worked as a fitness instructor. I got my Zumba certificate, started teaching dance to the community. First, I started off doing Zoom classes, just hoping someone would Venmo me a little bit of money, which I could then use that little bit of money to buy dinner that night, buy groceries. I also worked as a partner liaison for a company that I was really excited about that provided fitness and wellness to the Chicago community, the individuals who couldn't afford to pay for fancy gym memberships. Some of it was either schools, YMCA, elderly homes. They would pay for us to come in, and then we would teach Zumba classes, fitness classes, yoga classes, dance classes, So I was like combining my passion for taking care of marginalized individuals, providing fitness and wellness classes, and really combining my passions, which I loved, and sharing it with the community. One of the other things that I did is I started combining my interest in trauma. And as you know, as you see all the books behind me, and this is the nice version. I'm currently doing residency interviews. So this is the nice, clean version of my bookshelf. I have about 3 boxes filled with books. So not all my books are on here. This is just the nicer, cleaner version. But I started spending any additional moment during my leave of absence. I was reading about trauma, how trauma impacts the mental and physical health of individuals, and seeing how I could then combine that with my fitness classes. One of the trauma-informed movement classes I taught this past year was to a group of high school students from the inner city south side of Chicago. And this was actually with After School Matters. So to try to prevent individuals, teenagers, from going into gangs or not being in, if their parents had to work and they couldn't really do a lot of things. This was a safe place for them to go after school and to learn skills. So I actually taught a combined trauma-informed movement class. In one of my first classes, I had the students, these teenage girls, write down on a huge whiteboard a list of all the identities they possessed. At first, they wrote down the basic ones, such as gender, race, and grade level. However, with some encouragement, they began to write various identities, including their own sexualities, mental health conditions, and roles they had in their life. These young adults were actively exploring which identities fit them best, and they were not afraid to let the society dictate the identities they had to mold to. That's really what I loved doing that activity. And I brought, kind of stepping away, I think that I did this when I was in college. So I was a resident advisor for a year, and one of our group activities we did during our RA training, a list of various identities, and we had to select which ones we fit into. And that was kind of the first time that I started to oh, I'm a Latina. Oh, I am a girlfriend. Oh, I'm a daughter, a sister, a reader, a martial artist. So trying to actually separate like who I am to different parts of me who create who I am. So I think this was such a meaningful way for the teens to also kind of step away from just the typical identities that society has given them and really explore all the different parts of who they are. I continue reading. At this point, again, I was once again struck with understanding my own identity. Was I a fitness instructor, a mentor, a social media advocate? Was I still even a medical student? Who was I? The boxes I had previously constructed for myself felt very constrictive and were really disintegrating at the touch. I felt once again alone and emotionally burdened. Through dealing with the various struggles over my leave of absence, writing, journaling became one of my outlets in a form of how I was able to develop resilience. Sometimes I would share these writings with my community through these blog posts who had chosen to support me in this journey. And so my identity shifted throughout the year from a washout and a failure to an advocate and even an activist. I learned that even though I was on leave of absence, my words had power. And my new privilege of being a medical student allowed my voice to be broadcasted. And that's what I'm doing right now. It's amazing to look back, and I wrote this a year ago, and just throughout my 3rd year, my 4th year of medical school, and in 4 months, I'm gonna get my MD, actually get my medical doctorate, and I'll have another identity. And it's amazing how I've been able to shift these failures and as just part of my journey and be accepting of, yeah, I failed, and not creating excuses of why I failed, but more just understanding and accepting of life happens. Things happen. It's not always will everything go as planned, and that is okay. And I actually just earlier this morning, I had another residency interview, and I was talking with the program director about these failures actually, because it usually comes up, and I'm expected it comes up. They always, sometimes they ask, how did you go? Actually today, the program director asked, how did you go from failing step 1 twice to suddenly doing really well on step 2 the following year? And I explained that throughout my leave of absence, I was going through so many social, emotional, physical challenges. And once I was able to address each of those challenges and social determinants, when I was a third year and I now had my medical school tuition back, leave of like I had my living expenses paid for. I didn't have to worry about being kicked out because we couldn't afford rent for many months. I had food. I knew how to take care of my health. I knew that I needed to sleep in order to study. Once I was able to address my health and address all these challenges, I was able to study because I knew what I needed. And then the success, the doing well on step 2 is what happened. And I think that is so important, especially when talking about just identity. Failures can come from all different forms. It doesn't have to just be a grade. Like we know in academics, it can be getting bad diagnosis, like a diagnosis, or learning that you didn't do well on the job interview, you didn't get the job. I think the biggest thing I've learned is it does impact all these traumas and painful experiences are gonna impact you, and that's okay. It's all part of your journey. If life was easy and everything went as planned, how would we be able to grow and change and improve? And that's what's special about life. I like the quote of, how can you understand light if you don't know what darkness is? Or how can you understand darkness if you've never been there? Going back to conclude, sharing one's struggle can develop an identity of resilience, which is also a result of attempting to overcome life's traumas, pains, and failures. And I'll say not just overcome, but learn from them and keep going, and realizing that that is life, and that life will keep going, that things will get better. Thank you so much for listening to this blog post. Was there anything that I said that resonated with you? Put down in the comments, what types of struggles or pains have you felt like that you've experienced? Let me know if you like this podcast by rating it. It helps to get it to other individuals who are also struggling through life's failures, traumas. If you haven't already, follow my podcast. I have plenty of more things to talk about and add. You can read some of the blog posts I have already written to this point at medpsychmoss.com/blog. You can also follow me on social media at medpsychmoss. I like to share not just the positives, but I like to share as these traumas and these struggles are happening to me, to show that this is how life works, especially on social media when we usually only show the highlighted reels. let's really show what the real life is about. Thank you so much. I look forward to talking to you all soon, and also on future podcasts. I'm already lining up a group of current physicians and future physicians that are also patients themselves or have been patients at some point. So I'm so excited to interview them, and I hope you will follow us on our journey. Thank you. Take care.